Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast with Marcy Nettles. I am so excited that you're all here today for an amazing story. These stories, I truly believe, will help you decide what to do next in your life because many people are finding themselves in difficult positions, maybe even breakdown opportunities, and they just need to see someone else and what they did to be able to get out of the difficult time they were in. And so I am super excited to be able to bring you another amazing guest today. Her name is Tracy Inscore. She has practiced land use and environmental law in California for the past 15 years. In addition to still practicing law part-time at one of the fastest growing law firms in the US, she is also a holistic energy practitioner specializing in burnout prevention and recovery for fellow lawyers, as well as providing support for law students and recent law school graduates. Tracy's legal and business background, combined with her heart as a highly intuitive healer and teacher, allows her to bridge these two worlds in a way that no one else can. She skillfully combines heart-centered energy and somatic work with a grounded, practical, and real-world understanding of the issues her clients face. So I'm really excited to have Tracy here today. We're going to have a really great conversation. Between the two of us, we decided that the title of her episode would be You're Burned Out and Depressed. What now? So, Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcy.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited for the What Now Tribe to learn more about you. So let's start there. Would you please share more about who Tracy is and maybe what life was like for you as a child?
Absolutely. So, my story, I was kind of like the stereotypical overachiever, alpha woman, trying to do all the things and be successful, all of the outward markings of success, right? So, going to law school and being a star associate at my firm when I first started practicing law, and all of these things that were really so out of alignment with who I truly was. So at odds with my own feminine energy, even. And then, really I have been able to trace all of this back to sort of the earlier years as you mentioned. And so yeah, growing up in the 80s and 90s here in Southern California, my parents were part of a very high control religious group. So, for anyone wanting to know more about that, actually, you should check out episode 114 with Sally Lotz because she did an amazing job talking about her experience in a cult. And I had so many of the same experiences. Um, but I was an only child. My dad had a pretty extreme temper, and this particular religious group really promoted harsh physical punishment of children, even to the point of passing out paddles at the church services. So that was not a good combo because my dad, who had his own unresolved issues, really had then an outlet to unleash that anger on me, but with the church telling him this is a good thing that you're doing. She needs this. So it was kind of a bad combo. And when I was around 14, my parents divorced. I left high school shortly after that. I tested out. I was just extremely bored. I hated high school. I started working and going to a junior college when I was 16 and have worked ever since and been very independent and was very successful in college because what I learned as a child was that even though so much felt outside of my control, there was so much unpredictability and feeling like walking on eggshells and having to be hyper vigilant. I learned that academic achievement was a way to make sure my needs were met, to make sure that no one was upset with me, to kind of smooth things over and have more control over my life. I got a lot of positive feedback from that. I got a lot of positive, reward and reinforcement. And so while that was a positive thing in some ways, it really set the stage for this burnout pattern later in life because my whole identity became centered around doing, performing, achieving, fixing, helping, rescuing, all the things. And so I get to the point of being a new law school graduate. I'm in a job that feels terrible, so unaligned, but outwardly I'm thriving, right? I'm doing really well. I feel at that point I have no choice. I have student loan debt to pay off, so I just got to keep going. And I bought my first house and I was representing one of the largest companies in the world, and outside it looked like I was doing so well, and there was such a huge disconnect. Um, Suffering with severe depression, with binge drinking, a lot of health issues because my body was desperately trying to tell me something is wrong.
Wow. Okay. Wow. All right. So I'm going to pause you right there because there is so much that you just shared right there. And I think that there's so much right there that people are going to be identifying with. They're going to see themselves in it. So, first of all, how old were you when your family began in this cult, or were you born into it?
I was born into it and we left when I was around 10.
Okay, so 10 years, those formative years.
Mhm.
You're, first of all, a little girl, being a normal little girl, and yet dad is giving, been given permission to punish you in such a way that creates this coping mechanism of control, which the other things you just mentioned, the alcohol, the binge drinking, that sort of stuff, those are coping mechanisms. But a lot of people don't think about control being a coping mechanism. What would you say about coping mechanisms and especially the aspect of control?
Oh, yeah. When you have unresolved stuff going on, it will show up in the sneakiest ways. And so that can show up as wanting to control other people in some instances. It can be really rigid self-control, maybe in terms of over-exercising, really extreme dieting, anything to control your reality. And so that's what I've also noticed within myself, because I had a lot of those other things going on too, where I would overexercise to the point of injury. It didn't really matter what I would do, I would overdo it to an extreme. Um, and it was just part of this overall pattern.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for that. And when you talk about testing out of school at such a young age, that was also another form of you being able to be in control. Because if you tested out of high school, what were you able to do? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. I went and got a job and I was making my own money and I had a car and yeah, became an adult at a very young age. But that provided a lot of sense of, big sense of safety and, like you said, control.
yeah, most definitely. So, okay, so I love that you became a lawyer, but because we need good lawyers, we need good attorneys, right? Yet, how old were you when you made the decision that that was going to be your career of choice?
I was probably around 20, 21. And I thought, well, I love writing and I think I would be good at this. And also, I'm very squeamish, so medicine was not an option. And I'm not really great at math. And so I was like, law school seems like a natural fit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, law school also is a great place to make a good income. And so
Exactly.
that security and being in control again would be, because you were doing it and you were taking care of yourself. Yet, with, and I'll just call it what it is, the trauma that you experienced as a child, what part did that play in the decision that you made to become an attorney?
It was huge. And I would say that in terms of both positive and negative impacts. From the positive side, being in that kind of upbringing really caused me to question everything and to be a very critical, independent thinker because I learned to recognize a lot of these manipulation tactics that this group used and the fear-based kind of stuff. And so I think that equipped me very well to be a critical thinker. Um, on another note, seeing how hard it was for my mom when my parents divorced and she had been a stay-at-home mom and didn't really have an income. And I kind of made one of those vows to myself, like, that will never be me. I am going to be so financially set and I'm not going to depend on anyone for anything. And I'm going to make sure that that is not me. So, in that sense, it was motivated from a little bit of more of a fear based place.
Yeah. Okay. And you know what though? It's like when we look at our moms, we love them so much, and especially in these types of circumstances where dad may have been the one that was bringing the negative to your childhood, and mom was probably, hopefully, there trying to console you and love you and give you what you needed there. Yet, what we end up doing, especially when it's coming out of trauma, placing our moms on this pedestal, right? And so wanting to also live up and impress her and make her happy for who you've become. Did that play a part at all in your choices?
I think I felt a sense of still needing to take care of her.
Mm,
And so I wanted to make sure also that I was very financially stable so that I would be able to help her and be a source of stability for her.
okay. So
Yeah.
critical thinking, I love that you brought that up because I'd love your thoughts on critical thinking and how many people do not utilize this skill. How could someone that doesn't really even understand what critical thinking is come to understand it and then start applying it in their own lives?
So I think you're absolutely right, Marcy, that so much of that has been lost, especially in our current society. We've seen so many things play out in the last few years, especially um, where there's been a blind trust placed in the media, in social media, in the government. I could go on and on, just so many aspects of society that I think people are really starting to awaken to their own truth and their own power. But I would say that good, true critical thinking always has to be combined with your own intuition and your own heart. You have to be connected to your own heart, to your own higher self or inner being, whatever you want to call it, God, um, to be able to decipher what is really going on to and to think for yourself. How do I really feel about that? Does this resonate with me? Does this feel true to me? What might another perspective be? Because it's so easy to get caught into our own narrow little way of looking at things. Can you be open to just holding space for someone else's reality? It doesn't have to be your reality, or anything that you even agree with, but can you just allow it to exist? I think so many people have lost the ability to even entertain another point of view.
Yes. Yes, I agree 100% with everything that you just said there. I think along the same lines, and yet flip side, is that the other side of the coin is people have become so accustomed to following along to what the group think is. And
Mm-hmm.
so the critical thinking or the common sense has been kind of put to the side because, oh, this is what everybody is thinking. And so I better think it too because they're afraid to maybe stand out or to be different. Yet that could be
Yeah.
detrimental.
Oh, for sure. I think that comes from a really deep fear of rejection and and wanting to belong. You know, we evolved as part of tribal units and we want that acceptance and that belonging. So it can be really painful to say, "Oh, wow, I don't agree with this at all," and risk losing friends, losing family in maybe speaking up for what you believe to be true. So yeah, I've definitely seen that play out.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have lost their true identity
Hmm.
in the fear of speaking their minds and their truth. As you mentioned, it's like we each have our own truth. Just asking yourself, it's like, how is this settling with me? Does this feel like it is right and it's good? And if it doesn't, asking why. Why doesn't it feel good to me? And why do I think that maybe there might be another truth in here somewhere? And then being willing to go down that rabbit hole and ask questions and do some investigating for yourself. It's like,
Absolutely.
come on, people, we got to wake up. We all have a responsibility. We all do.
Yes, with any great freedom comes great responsibility. And it's really about choosing your own consequences, choosing your own hard thing, you know.
Yes. Yes. And with every decision comes that consequence. It's like, which heart am I choosing, right? Because life really can be difficult. It can be beautiful and difficult at the same time. But like with you, when you became an attorney, I mean, you've been one for like 16 years now. That's a long time.
Hmm.
Being an attorney is also a high stress situation. Can you share with What Now Tribe what your career has been like and what it kind of led to for you? You kind of alluded to it earlier, but can you share deeper on that?
Sure. So I've been really lucky that I've been really with the same firm for my entire career, which is very rare. We are part of a larger firm now. We were acquired a couple years ago, but I started out, I would say it was a mid-sized firm, and the individual people were amazing. I still work with so many of the same people who helped to mentor and train me when I was a brand new graduate back in 2008. I'm so grateful for them. Um, the nature of legal work in general and the just the legal industry does have a lot of uh, not only stresses, but can tend to be toxic in some ways. I mean, you're dealing with high pressure adversarial situations. The potential consequences for making a mistake
Yeah.
are really high. And to be honest, I mean, when I graduated in 2008 and it was in the middle of a recession, it was like you took any job you could, whether you were interested in that area of practice or not. So, did I really want to do real estate, land use, environmental? Not really. I find it to be pretty boring, to be honest, but that's what was paying the bills. And if I had known more about alignment and my purpose and mission and values back then, I do think I would have made different choices. But what I found is that I really had the control to make my legal career into what worked for me. And so after I got through those initial 5 years, yeah, I did kind of hit a wall, crashed, had major burnout. And I woke up one morning and I just said, I cannot do this anymore. And so I resigned. I took a six-figure pay cut. I started working in-house at an environmental consulting firm. I became a law professor, started doing some teaching on the side, some other editing work on the side. I was even a fitness instructor for a couple years. Loved it. Had so much fun doing all those things. And yet I managed to burn out doing all of those things too, because it was never really about the job. Yes, being a lawyer is stressful, but it was about the energy that I brought into being a lawyer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's talk more about that. First of all, help the listeners really understand what burnout is and what it looks like, how it can show up in a human being. And then where does it really come from? Let's talk deeper about that.
Yeah. So the back in 2018, the World Health Organization actually officially recognized burnout, but only as an occupational phenomenon. And so their definition is kind of under inclusive. It's really only specific to career and workplace, but we know that burnout can happen whether you're caregiving for an elderly parent or a homeschooling mom. It can happen outside of the workplace. And so, from an energy medicine perspective, burnout to me is caused by a chronic state of depletion mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually for an extended period of time to the point that getting a good night's sleep, doing all the self care doesn't fix the issue. We all have seasons of life. Like right now, one of my best friends has a 3-day-old baby. She's exhausted, but that will get better and then she's going to feel better, right? Burnout doesn't really resolve itself that way. I've heard it described as being tired at the soul level. It's like my soul is just exhausted. And I think what makes it different from just stress, I hate that term, by the way, just stress, because stress is killing us.
Absolutely.
Um,
As root cause.
yeah, is really more a feeling of helplessness, of hopelessness. It's feeling disengaged, detached, loss of interest. It really is leaning more towards depression. We find ourselves in more of a freeze state. And now this can be hard if you're someone who already suffers from clinical depression like I did. It's like, well, am I burned out because I'm depressed, or am I depressed because I'm burned out? Because there is so much overlap in the symptoms. For me, it really was all kind of traceable to these deeper root cause issues, um, because everything is energy. And the human body is essentially a conduit for energy. It's meant to flow to us and through us so we can give, but also receive. And so many of my clients have trouble with the receiving part, whether that's receiving help, receiving gifts, receiving compliments, even receiving adequate compensation for their work so that maybe they could work a little less, allowing themselves to do things they enjoy. So there's so many reasons that our energy system can actually become blocked and imbalanced, and we find ourselves in that chronic state of depletion.
So, okay, so chronic state of depletion, where have you found to be the most common reasons or contributors to this status or state of health?
So a big one is living outside of your true purpose or out of alignment with your core values or your priorities, because it is exhausting to try to essentially pretend to be someone you're not,
Yeah.
and fitting yourself into a life. It's like wearing too small clothes or shoes. You're trying to squeeze yourself in and it doesn't work for you. You know, you have a great statement on your website, Marcy, where it says something like making decisions based on who you are today rather than yesterday. So many of us are living a life that just no longer fits. Um, Maybe you're, if you're not using your natural gifts and instead you're trying to force yourself down another path, that takes a lot of energy. Some of the other things might be childhood family dynamics are a huge one. So past trauma, nervous system dysregulation. We also see subconscious blocks. So fears, limiting beliefs, especially around money. Maybe a belief that we have to struggle and sacrifice in order to be worthy, that it's not allowed to be easy for us. And then, of course, we have tons of societal programming, this boss babe hustle culture that is, glorifies lack of sleep and being busy, which I also hate that term.
As do I.
Yeah. So many things.
Oh my goodness, for sure. I mean, it really, you could look at any aspect of your life and you could see where it could become a barrier if you're not in that alignment that you had mentioned. How can someone figure out whether or not they are in alignment? And if they figure that it's like, oh, this isn't feeling good to me anymore, how do they find what they do align with?
So I think it's
I
really
know that's big questions. That's like really broad.
well, first, I think it starts with curiosity and an openness and willingness to just ask yourself those hard questions. And because I've done that so many times with my clients, I actually created a free e-workbook. You can download it on my website that actually walks you through that exact process of identifying what is your life purpose? What were you put on this earth to do? What is your mission right now? What are your core values? And then what are your top priorities? Because I know for myself, I only seriously sat down and identified those things like when I was in my late 30s. So many of us have never really taken the time to inventory that and to kind of be guided with specific examples. So I would say definitely check that out, because I think that'll give you a helpful starting point.
That's great. That is such a great thing. And I believe that we're going to actually provide that as the free gift to the listeners. So we'll make sure that they all get it connected to that as they request it. Because we all need that guidance. And I think that like I'm a maturing woman. I'm in my mid 50s and I know for a fact that that is not something that my mother ever knew anything about. And if she had, her life probably would have been much more simple and she would have felt so much more fulfilled, right? And so since she didn't know it, I wasn't taught it. And since I didn't know it, I didn't teach it and pass it on to my daughter, right? And so I think it's really important for every person, no matter at what stage of life you're at right now, this is an important thing to grasp and to figure out for yourself. What fulfills you? What do you enjoy? What brings joy and light to your eyes, right? I mean, it's like, what makes you smile so hard that your cheeks hurt?
Yes.
You get to that point and you found it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. So you found yourself in a pretty dire state. I mean, it was affecting you physically, your health, all that. And I mean, before you found out about EFT, which I want for you to explain what EFT is and how it helped you in the depth of your burnout. But I mean, what did you try up until the point of learning about EFT?
I tried absolutely everything. I tried traditional talk therapy, which I'm a huge fan of. I tried breath work. I tried meditation. I tried Reiki. So a lot of alternative methods. I also tried anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication. And I will say it's like layers to healing. I don't think I was truly ready to find EFT and actually accept it until I had done all those other things. So it's not that those other things didn't work. It's they all kind of got me to the point where I was finally ready to go into that deeper level of healing. Because when I actually first heard about EFT, I was so skeptical that I didn't try it for like 2 years. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded too easy. And I always thought, healing and any kind of change has got to be hard, right? It's got to take a lot of time and energy and effort. And this seemed, too good to be true.
Yeah, well, that's more of that programming, right?
Yeah.
It's that programming that anything worthwhile is going to take a whole lot of hard work, right? And yeah, for some things it does take work, but not everything. And so that's where being curious and being open to something different than what you had already been trying, because if you had just continued with those things that weren't helping you, you would still be stuck in that same state. So explain, what is EFT? What does it stand for? First of all, it's EFT. So what does that stand for? And how did it help you with your severe burnout?
Sure. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, also commonly referred to as tapping. And it involves tapping on certain meridian points in a specific sequence while we focus on a particular emotion, could be a traumatic memory, anything that's bothering us. And so it's based in traditional Chinese medicine, and it centers around that core premise that everything is energy, that all negative emotion is caused by energy blockages within the body because we are vibrational beings, and every emotion, every experience carries a certain vibration or frequency. We're like little sponges. And it's really true that our issues are stored in our tissues. The body keeps the score. And for me, I was overdeveloped in a lot of the cognitive strategies to deal with stress, negative emotions, past trauma, all of that. I could logically and rationally understand different viewpoints and process what happened to me up here mentally, but there was a complete mind body disconnect. And so, come to find out, in terms of the communications between our brain and body, 80% is going from our body to our brain. Only about 20% goes from our brain to our body. But yet we spend so much more effort on that 20%. And so finding EFT was really that missing piece for me because it's a somatic technique that works in the body, helps us to calm and soothe the nervous system. So it calms down the amygdala in the brain so that we can get out of that chronic fight or flight state and actually access our prefrontal cortex, which is where our creative problem solving lives. And um, So most of us are familiar with the meridian system because of acupuncture, where we place the needles along these meridians. There's like 12 main meridians. Each one corresponds to a different part of the body. And our life force energy, or chi, flows through these meridians. And so traditional Chinese medicine and the practice of acupuncture were way ahead of their time, thousands of years ago, when they identified the meridian system, which basically corresponds to the framework of the nervous system as we're starting to understand it in modern Western medicine. And so it just really involves light fingertip tapping on specific points. There's a specific sequence. As a practitioner, I'll work with the client to first really identify what's bothering them and get as specific as possible. But when we're doing that, when we're engaging the body, the nervous system, the subconscious mind, and the tapping is really sending these signals of safety to the body. It allows us to actually process our emotions and those past experiences instead of just suppressing or denying them or covering them up with like positive affirmations. So
Okay. Okay, that was very helpful. So when we're talking about the tapping, it's almost like it's disrupting the additional story that we've added to what happened in a certain circumstance. Because we all do that, right? It's like something can happen that's negative in our lives. And as time goes by, as we think about it, we keep adding additional emotion and additional thoughts around that little thing. And with the tapping, is that what you're doing? Is you're kind of disrupting that psychological aspect of the stories that we've added to what actually happened to us? Is that potentially part of what's happening?
absolutely. It's like a pattern interrupt. And also, we're deactivating that emotional charge. When I say emotional charge, I think we can all relate to that feeling of when we recall something really upsetting from our past. You feel it physically, it's a visceral feeling of tingling, numbness, rage. You feel it in your stomach. That means that thing is still very much energetically active and present within you. And so by using EFT, it's not that we forget or erase what happened, it's we can actually take that emotional charge out. And people are shocked when they think back. And I'll say, all right, let's revisit that. And they're like, okay, I I can evaluate it now kind of almost as a neutral, objective third party rather than being back in that moment. And that's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and it does. It seems like it is really simple, right? So when you heard about it, first of all, how did you find it and how long did it take for it to really work for you?
So I found it on YouTube and I was watching the tapping solution, which is a great free resource for anyone who wants to check that out. And I forget what exactly I was upset about at the time, but they were guiding through a tapping sequence just to deal with stress. And I tried it, and they always, you always identify how you're feeling on a 0 to 10 scale. So 10 being unbearable, 0 being, don't care at all. And I was maybe like an 8 with whatever was bothering me. And I get through the first couple tapping sequences, and the guy goes, all right, check in with that emotion, see if you can find it. Does it feel further away? Or like, where is it? And I'm just like, what happened? It's gone. I don't care. Like, yes, I know that that's still a thing, but I don't feel I'm not upset anymore. I was just blown away. I started doing all the tapping I could find, learning more about it, doing it on my own, working with other practitioners, and decided I need to become a practitioner and bring this to as many people as possible.
You know, that is amazing because seriously, there are so many resources out there that if someone is feeling a certain way about anything, you can really go out and you can Google it. Be careful what you find. Make sure that you
Mhm.
do investigate the things that you find, but you can have answers at your fingertips. But then, like you said, it's like you can do it on your own. Some of it, there's a lot of free resources. Yet having a practitioner that's working with you specifically, helping you identify exactly how you're feeling, is definitely an added benefit. especially somebody that understands the importance of the subconscious mind and the nervous system and how they work together. Can you share how EFT affects the nervous system and that subconscious mind?
Absolutely. So, our nervous system is basically our body's command center. It's our brain, spinal cord, neurons, controls basically every function in our body. We have the autonomic nervous system, and that's where all of our involuntary processes come in, like breathing and our heart rate. And we have that has two parts. So we have the sympathetic nervous system. That's what's controlling our fight or flight response. And then our parasympathetic regulates our rest and digest. So unless there's an active threat for most of us, we feel better being in that parasympathetic state. So what happens when we get into that state of fight or flight, though, is the amygdala in the brain is overstimulated and it causes the blood flow to actually leave the prefrontal cortex. So our problem solving abilities kind of go out the window at the time when we need it most. And we revert to maybe some more of our more primal responses. And our brains and our bodies haven't evolved enough yet to know the difference between a real life or death situation, like being chased by a tiger, and like getting a stressful email. It registers the same. And so our body will produce adrenaline and cortisol as part of our survival instinct. But in the case of burnout, that can become a chronic state where we're just constantly pumping out adrenaline and cortisol, drowning in these stress chemicals because our body constantly thinks it's under attack. So our subconscious mind and our nervous system are constantly in communication. They're taking cues from each other as far as what feels safe. And so I like to describe our subconscious mind as like a computer or software that's just running in the background. It's always working. You may not be aware of it, but around 90% of our brain activity is subconscious rather than conscious. So it's really running the show. And it's not only recording everything that happens to us, but it's also impacting our current behavior and choices. And so um, our subconscious will let our nervous system know when something is perceived as a threat so that we can have the correct physiological response. But so many of us are walking around in this constant state of stress response, which is a state we were never meant to live in. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
That's okay. So, and there's so many things that contribute to that, right? Especially because when we think about that 90% that is all subconscious, the foundation of where our subconscious activity comes from is that 0 to 8 years old.
yes,
Right. And so those experiences that you had from the time you were born up until about 8 years old is what you're basing all of the subconscious activity off of, which is crazy, right? We're having 8-year-old controlling 90% of our brain pretty much. And yet that's why it's so important for you to be able to get back to those root emotions, those root events that happened in your life and why you're feeling and thinking the way that you are and coming to terms with that 8-year-old.
absolutely. Yeah, because before that age, our limbic system was not fully developed and we were totally dependent on our caregivers. So we processed information and what was happening to us in a very different way. And I always say, this is not about blaming or shaming our parents, or it's actually just about taking responsibility so that that 6 or 7 year old version of us is no longer running the show. Um, yeah.
No wonder we're in so much fight or flight. I mean, seriously. So you've used the word amygdala a couple times here, and
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that there's probably people listening that aren't quite sure what that big word is. Can you break that down and let us know what part of the brain is that, and what does it control, and why is it so important?
Oh, sure. So yeah, it's the part of our brain that controls our stress response among, some other uh bodily functions, but it's really responsible for letting us know, activating us into that fight or flight state in the event of an actual threat. Its job is to kind of pick up and perceive danger.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
of course.
So let's kind of take you back just a little bit for just a moment. I would love to know what you now, Tracy, doing what you currently do and what you know and what you've been through in your life, what you would go back to your pre 8-year-old self and say to yourself. What would you say to young Tracy?
Oh, I would say it's all going to be okay, and just keep making good choices. But it is okay to do things that you love to do. It's okay to be creative. It's okay to be empathic and to have really big feelings about things. I think that would have saved that version of myself just so much heartache and trouble. But honestly, I wouldn't change too much because it's all part of what brought me to where I am now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love to hear when I ask that specific question of people, because in all reality, you would not be who you are without having gone through the difficulties you've gone through and making the decisions to change and to grow and to learn and then to help other people, right? That's what life is about. So, embracing the difficulties that you've been through, learning from it, and choosing to move forward is like a huge message, specifically from this podcast. But really, that's why we're here together on this planet, so that we can
Absolutely.
learn from each other, we can help each other, and hopefully prevent someone else having to go through everything we went through.
Yes.
Yeah, so good. So tell us then. So what are you doing now? I know that you're working with other attorneys and lawyers to help them with their burnout, but what all are you doing to be able to help people, first of all, recognize when they might be approaching burnout and those people that just really are in it, or maybe people that are like, I want to prevent that from ever happening to me. What are you doing for those people?
So another reason I love EFT is that it is a great preventative tool to take care of yourself before you reach that burnout point. So it's great just for dealing with everyday acute stress. And it is meant to be a self-healing technique. I mean, that's really kind of redundant because I think all healing is self-healing. We all hold so much power within us to heal and to make our lives and realities whatever we want them to be. Um, and so, really, my goal is to teach this technique to people so that they can do it on their own. Yes, as a practitioner, I'm there to walk people through the stickier issues, especially in the case of trauma, and really knowing what questions to ask that help people to get unstuck a lot faster than maybe if they're just trying to work through on their own, because sometimes we're too close to our own issues. And I myself work with another practitioner every week where we trade sessions because I myself need this work. As you mentioned, I still also practice law part time, so um, I really am able to relate to what my clients are going through because I'm not so far removed from it. So I'm able to say, hey, this is the technique that I use every day, and this is what I'm doing. And I get it. I truly get what you're going through, and this is what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, that's so good because a lot of people think that it's like I'm not doing well, I'm not well in the thing that I'm doing right now. And so I have to change entirely what I'm doing. Where if they just implemented this processes of first identification and then utilizing the EFT processes to be able to preserve, especially if they like what they do, it's just a high stress situation, to be able to preserve and prevent a total breakdown.
Exactly. And that's such a great point because I have had some clients who maybe decide that the legal profession isn't right for them, or maybe a non-lawyer who also wants to leave their current job. But more often than not, we're able to increase their resilience and to really change the way they relate to others in such a way that they're able to stay in their current profession or position, and the way that people respond to them differently because they've then changed their um, energy, their point of attraction. And it's so true that our inner world will always be reflected in our outer reality. And so leaving isn't always the best choice, because whatever energy you leave a situation, you're going to just bring that same energy into the new thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that reminds me of a story that my husband was sharing on a video earlier today about our oldest, or not our oldest, our youngest son is getting ready to graduate and he's got some inner turmoil kind of going on. And so my husband was reflecting back to when he graduated from high school, and what his grandma told him was that if your insides don't match your outsides, you have got work to do. Meaning, if you're putting on a mask and showing everybody else something other than what you're feeling on the inside, you have work to do. So, as people have been listening to our conversation today, and we have people there thinking, it's like, oh my gosh, I think I'm on the verge of a burnout. What would you tell them as a tip just to be able to get started either on the identification if that's exactly what's going on, or what to do first? What would you say to them?
I would say, yeah, that the honest self-reflection is always the first good starting point. And whether that involves some journaling or speaking with someone you trust. Um, and then from there, I can only share what's worked so well for me, and that is using the technique of EFT, finding those free resources. Maybe it's not in the budget for you to work with a practitioner right now, or you don't feel called to do that, but just incorporating that as a daily wellness practice. Because so much of the self-care advice that we're given sometimes just doesn't feel realistic. It's like, oh, go to yoga or just practice deep breathing. And um, that's just not always possible. And so, what I love so much about this technique is that it's very active. It's very it works very quickly, and you can literally do it anywhere, whether that's in your car or you need to go in the restroom or close your office door. You don't need like an hour long appointment to do this technique and to start feeling it work within you. And from there, you know, like the three-part process that I work through with my clients is first taking the edge off. It's kind of like the hierarchy of needs, that when we are in a crisis mode, we really can't do any of that deeper work of designing the life that we want. So we first got to get you out of crisis mode. Second is to start clearing those deeper underlying issues that led to the crisis mode in the first place. What are those habits, the people pleasing tendencies, or the lack of boundaries, or whatever it is? And then step three is really, all right, what do you want instead? How do you want your life to look? And is there anything that's stopping you from creating that? All right, then we'll clear that too.
So good and so simple, right? So
Yeah.
good. So, where can the What Now Tribe listeners connect with you and follow you, whether it's social media, your website? Share that, please.
So my website is tapoutburnout.com. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most active. So I would love to speak with you, work with you. I do offer free 30-minute burnout strategy sessions to just chat and um, share, share what's going on and see if we might be a good fit.
Wonderful. Okay. And by the way, guys, you know that I love to get some freebies for you from my amazing guests. And today, Tracy is actually offering you her free ebook, the Beat Burnout by Being Your True Self ebook, as well as a discounted session price for any What Now Tribe listener that reaches out to marcynettles.com/freebies. And I'll get you connected to Tracy and to that free ebook. So that's marcynettles.com/freebies. So, Tracy, do you have any final words that you'd like to leave the tribe with?
You are so powerful. There has been so much effort in trying to take away our knowledge and realization of our own power. That's not by accident, but you can reclaim that, and just to know how truly powerful you are.
Amen. I agree 100%, girlfriend. Thank you so much for being here today and being such an amazing guest, sharing your personal story, but then now your expertise on how you're helping people through their own burnout. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Marcy.
You're welcome.